It is finally hers.
My daughter smiled as she slipped my wedding ring from my finger. I was lying in a hospital bed, my eyes closed, pretending the medication had pulled me into a deep sleep. Rachel glanced toward the door, then curled her fingers around the ring Daniel had placed on my hand 43 years earlier. "It's finally mine," she whispered. She kissed my forehead before hiding it inside her purse. I wanted to open my eyes and demand an explanation. Instead, I stayed perfectly still, swallowing the pain of realizing my own daughter had stolen from me. Because Rachel didn't know one crucial thing. The ring she had taken wasn't the real one. Before I tell you what happened next, please like this video and subscribe if you believe family stories deserve to be heard. Tell me in the comments, could you forgive your own child after a betrayal like this? And let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Sometimes knowing someone is listening makes a painful memory a little easier to share. My name is Samantha Flores, and I was 68 when I learned that grief could change shape. At first, grief was quiet. It lived in the empty chair across from me at breakfast. It followed me through the hallway at night. It waited beside the closet where Daniel's jacket still hung, even though he had been gone for almost 4 years. Daniel and I had been married for 43 years. We met in Columbus, Ohio when I was 22 and working at a neighborhood pharmacy. He came in every Thursday to buy the same cough drops, even during summer. One afternoon, I asked, "Do you really have a cough that lasts all year?" He smiled. "No, but you work Thursdays." That was Daniel. He never needed grand speeches. He said simple things that stayed with me for decades. He owned a small watch repair shop near Westerville. People brought him pocket watches, music boxes, and clocks that had not worked in 20 years. Daniel always said, "Old things deserve patience." I believed he was talking about clocks. Years later, I understood he meant people too. We married in a modest church with stained glass windows and a basement that smelled like coffee and lemon cake. There were 40 guests and one nervous groom who nearly dropped my ring. His fingers shook as he slid it onto my hand. "Too late to run now," I whispered. He looked into my eyes. I already found home. The ring was beautiful, but not flashy. A small diamond sat in the center, surrounded by delicate engraved lines. Inside the band, Daniel had added 4 words, "Always, even in silence." Our marriage was not perfect. We argued about bills. Daniel left tools on the kitchen table, and I threw away papers he claimed were important. But we never used silence as a weapon. Even when we were angry, one of us eventually reached for the other. For 43 years, that ring stayed on my hand through everything. It was there when Rachel was born. It was there when Daniel's shop nearly closed. It was there when my mother died, when we paid off our house, and when Rachel married Mark Bennett. Then one winter morning, Daniel clutched his chest in our kitchen. His coffee mug slipped from his hand and broke against the floor. I called 911, knelt beside him, and begged him to breathe. He looked at me once, not with fear, with apology, as if leaving me was something he had chosen. At the hospital, a doctor said they had done everything they could. I stared at my wedding ring while he spoke. That was the moment it stopped being jewelry. It became proof that Daniel had existed. Proof that I had once been loved every day by a man who knew exactly how I took my coffee and which side of the bed I preferred. After the funeral, Rachel stayed with me for almost 3 weeks. She slept in her childhood bedroom, made sure I ate sorted condolence cards, and drove me to the cemetery when I could not face going alone. One night, she found me sitting in the dark kitchen. Mom, have you slept at all? She slept in her childhood bedroom, made sure I ate sorted condolence cards, and drove me to the cemetery when I could not face going alone. One night, she found me sitting in the dark kitchen. Mom, have you slept at all? I sleep. No. You close your eyes. That isn't the same. She sat beside me and held my hand. Her thumb moved across my ring. Dad loved you so much, she whispered. He loved you too. I know. At that time, Rachel was still my safe place. She called every morning. She brought groceries every Sunday. She taped a list of emergency numbers beside my phone. Then, little things began to change. Rachel had married Mark 2 years before Daniel died. Mark was charming when he wanted to be. He sold construction equipment and talked constantly about large contracts and opportunities that were about to change everything. Daniel never trusted men who spoke more about success than work. He once told me, "A man who keeps announcing the harvest usually hasn't planted anything." I laughed then. I did not laugh later. After Daniel's death, Mark joined Rachel on more visits. At first, I was grateful. He checked the furnace and carried heavy boxes from the basement. But he looked around my house differently. He noticed the antique cabinet. He asked whether Daniel's old watches were insured. He wanted to know if the house was fully paid off. Rachel usually stopped him. "Mark, that's personal." He would smile. "I'm only trying to help." Then Rachel started asking questions too. Not direct questions. Not at first. She would glance at my ring and say, "Dad really had good taste." Or she would hold my hand and ask, "Have you ever had that cleaned professionally?" Once, while looking through old photographs, she pointed to my wedding picture. "Is that the same ring?" "Yes. It still looks perfect. Your father took care of things." She smiled, but her eyes stayed on the photograph. A few months later, Rachel and Mark moved into a larger house outside Columbus. They said the price was too good to pass up. I asked whether they could afford it. Rachel stiffened. "We've done the numbers, Mom." Mark leaned back. "You have to take risks if you want to build wealth." Daniel's voice echoed in my memory. A man who keeps announcing the harvest. I said nothing. Soon, Rachel stopped bringing groceries. She said work was busy. Mark was waiting for commissions. Their mortgage had increased. Their car needed repairs. Every conversation circled back to money. I tried not to judge her. Marriage brings pressure. Bills change people. Fear makes people say things they would not normally say. That was what I told myself. Then one Sunday, Rachel came over alone. She found me polishing the ring with a soft cloth. She stood in the doorway before speaking. "Mom, have you ever wondered what it's worth?" I looked up. "To me, no, I mean financially." The room felt colder. I folded the cloth and placed my hand in my lap. "Why would that matter? It doesn't," she said quickly. I was only curious. She kissed my cheek and started talking about dinner. But I had seen her face before she turned away. It was not the face of a daughter remembering her father. It was the face of someone calculating a price. And for the first time in my life, I looked at my own child and felt something I was ashamed to feel. Suspicion. The question about my wedding ring should have faded from my mind. Instead, it grew louder every day. After that Sunday, Rachel began asking about it whenever she visited. Never directly, always carefully. One afternoon, she brought over chicken soup because she knew it was my favorite. We ate at the kitchen table where Daniel and I had shared thousands of meals. She waited until I finished eating. Then she smiled. "Mom, have you ever thought about getting the ring insured?" I looked at her. "For what?" "In case someone steals it." I almost laughed. "No one is interested in an old widow's wedding ring?" "You'd be surprised." "I doubt it." She shrugged as if it were nothing, but nothing about that conversation felt natural. A week later, she tried again. This time, she came with Mark. He carried a box of pastries from a bakery downtown. Mark had always known how to make a good first impression. He complimented my garden. He fixed a loose cabinet hinge without being asked. Then, while we drank coffee, he casually leaned back in his chair. "You know, Samantha, vintage jewelry has gone crazy these days." "I wouldn't know." "My buddy sold his grandmother's ring for almost $40,000. "Good for him." He nodded toward my hand. "Sometimes people don't even realize what they're wearing." Rachel looked down at her coffee. She didn't say a word. I answered before either of them could continue. "My ring isn't for sale?" Mark raised both hands. "I wasn't suggesting that." But his smile disappeared a little too quickly. After they left, I stood at the kitchen window watching their car pull away. Daniel used to tell me something about people. When someone circles the same subject 3 times, Samantha, they're not making conversation. They're looking for an opening. That sentence came back to me now. I suddenly realized Rachel had asked about the ring 4 different times in less than 2 months. That wasn't curiosity. That was interest. A few days later, she called. "Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart. I was thinking about what. You should really have someone appraise the ring." I stayed quiet. "It would help with insurance." "I've never needed insurance for it." "But what if it's worth more than you think?" "It isn't." "How do you know?" "Because Daniel told me." The words almost escaped my mouth. Instead, I answered differently. "Some things aren't measured by money." Rachel sighed. "I know, Mom. I'm only trying to help." After we hung up, I sat in silence. Help. That word had started sounding different whenever it came from Rachel. That evening, I opened the old cedar chest in my bedroom. Most people would have seen nothing special inside. Photo albums, letters, Christmas ornaments, Daniel's favorite flannel shirt. But underneath a folded quilt lay a small leather notebook. It belonged to Daniel. Inside were little reminders he had written over the years. Appointments, ideas for repairing antique clocks, birthdays, random thoughts. As I turned the pages, one memory came rushing back. It had happened more than 20 years earlier. Rachel had still been in college. Daniel closed the curtains one Friday evening. He locked the front door twice. Then he walked into our bedroom carrying a small velvet box. "Samantha," he said quietly, "I need to show you something." I remember laughing. "You look like you're about to rob a bank." "I almost wish it were that simple." He opened the box. Inside was another wedding ring. It looked exactly like mine. I frowned. "What is this? A copy?" "A copy." He nodded. "An almost perfect one." I stared at him. "Daniel, why?" He sat beside me on the bed. "Do you remember that customer last month? The man with the railroad watch?" "No." "The woman whose family jewels I restored?" I nodded. She had inherited several expensive antique pieces. Daniel had repaired one damaged diamond setting. "Someone followed me home after that job." I felt my stomach tighten. "What?" "I noticed the same truck outside the shop 3 different days." "Did you call the police?" "I did." "They couldn't prove anything." He reached for my hand. "I don't think they're after your ring. But they believe I keep valuables here. So if someone ever breaks into this house?" He paused. "I don't want them taking the only thing I could never replace." I looked at my wedding ring. "You mean this?" He nodded. "I had a jeweler friend make an identical copy." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You want me to wear the fake one every day. And the real one, I'll hide it. Where? He smiled. If I tell you now, you'll forget. I will not. You absolutely will. I hit his arm. He laughed. Then his face became serious again. I'll show you when the time is right. The following Saturday, he finally revealed the hiding place. We promised each other no one else would ever know, not even Rachel. I had argued with him. She's our daughter. I know. Then why keep it from her? Because secrets don't become dangerous until more than two people know them. At the time, I thought he was being overly cautious. Now sitting alone in my bedroom 20 years later, I realized he had probably saved me. Since that day, I had worn the copy every single morning. The real ring stayed hidden exactly where Daniel had left it. Even after his death, I never changed that routine. No one noticed. Not Rachel, not Mark, no one. I closed the notebook and looked at the ring on my finger, the fake one. It had protected the real one for over 2 decades. Suddenly, another memory surfaced. About 6 months before Daniel died, Mark had helped clean out the storage room behind the watch shop. He had spent nearly 3 hours there, longer than necessary. At the time, I appreciated the help. Now I wondered, had he found something? Had he seen old paperwork? A receipt? A faded appraisal? Had Daniel accidentally left behind some clue about the original ring? The more I thought about it, the less comfortable I became. Maybe Rachel hadn't started asking questions on her own. Maybe someone had planted those questions in her mind. That evening, Rachel texted me. "Love you, Mom. Hope you had a good day." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "Love you too." Because I did. Nothing she had done had changed that. But love and trust are not the same thing. For the first time in my life, I found myself checking that my bedroom door was locked before I went to sleep. Not because I feared strangers, because I wasn't sure how much my own family knew. And somewhere deep inside me, a quiet voice whispered something I wasn't ready to believe. Daniel hadn't been protecting the ring. He had been protecting our family from what money could turn us into. After remembering what Daniel had told me about the ring, I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Maybe grief had made me suspicious. Maybe loneliness had turned ordinary conversations into warning signs. I wanted to believe that. But life had other plans. About 2 weeks later, I woke up feeling exhausted. Not sick, just drained. I blamed my age. I blamed the humid Ohio summer. I blamed another sleepless night spent staring at Daniel's side of the bed. I forced myself to make breakfast. Halfway through scrambling eggs, I had to sit down. My hands were trembling. "You're getting old, Samantha," I muttered to myself. I laughed. No one laughed back. The house had been painfully quiet ever since Daniel died. That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Rachel. "Mom, are you home?" "I am. I bought groceries. Mind if I stop by?" "Of course." 20 minutes later, she walked in carrying 3 reusable bags. Fresh fruit, soup, bread. Even the coffee I liked. It reminded me of the weeks after Daniel's funeral. For a moment, my heart softened. Maybe I had judged her too harshly. She hugged me tightly. "You've lost weight?" "I'm fine." "No, you're not." She opened my refrigerator. "There isn't enough food in here." "I shop when I need to." "You forget." "I don't." She turned toward me. "Mom, I'm worried." I wanted to believe her. I truly did. That evening, she cooked dinner in my kitchen. We laughed about an old family vacation. For almost an hour, things felt normal again. Then Mark arrived. He carried a toolbox. "I noticed your porch railing is loose. I've been meaning to fix it." I'll handle it. He spent nearly 40 minutes outside. When he finished, he wiped his hands with a towel. There. Thank you. He smiled. Family takes care of family. Again, nothing seemed wrong. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that he looked around my house more than he looked at me. His eyes moved from room to room. Bookshelves, cabinets, pictures. Almost as though he were memorizing the layout. Before leaving, Rachel stopped near the front door. Mom. Yes. I've been thinking. Here we go again. You live alone. I know. What if something happens? I'll call. What if you can't? She reached into her purse. I think I should have a spare key. I froze. I already have one. I know. But you should give me one too. I've managed this long. Mom. I gave the emergency key to Walter years ago. Her smile disappeared for only a second. You never told me that. I never needed to. Mark looked disappointed, only for a heartbeat. Then he forced another smile. Well, Walter is a good guy. He is. After they left, I walked to the window. Their car didn't move immediately. Rachel and Mark were talking. No, arguing. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw Mark throw both hands into the air. Rachel shook her head. A minute later, they drove away. Something was happening between them. Something bigger than a spare house key. The following week, I started receiving strange phone calls. The phone rang. I answered. Silence. Then someone hung up. The first time I ignored it. The second time I frowned. By the fifth call, I unplugged the phone for the evening. Walter Harris came by the next afternoon. Walter had been Daniel's closest friend for almost 50 years. He was 71, retired, and still wore suspenders every single day. He noticed my expression immediately. You look tired. I am. You sleeping? Not much. We sat on the porch, drinking iced tea. Without mentioning Rachel, I asked him something. Walter? What? Can people change that much? He looked at me for a long moment. They can. For better. And worse? I nodded slowly. What brought that on? I don't know. That wasn't entirely true. I knew exactly what had brought it on. I just wasn't ready to say it aloud. Walter changed the subject. Before leaving, he squeezed my shoulder. If you need anything, I know. You call. I will. 2 mornings later, everything changed. I woke before sunrise. The room spun when I sat up. I blamed low blood sugar. I walked into the kitchen. The coffee maker had just started brewing. I reached for a mug. Suddenly, my vision blurred. The cabinets seemed to move. I grabbed the counter. The floor tilted beneath me. I remember whispering Daniel's name. Then everything went black. The next thing I heard was someone shouting. Mom! Rachel! Her voice sounded far away. Mom, stay with me! I tried to answer. Nothing came out. I felt her holding my shoulders. Then she called 911. Her hands were shaking. I remember thinking, she really is scared. The ambulance arrived within minutes. Bright lights, questions, blood pressure, heart monitor. Someone asking my name. Another voice saying I was dehydrated and my blood pressure was dangerously low. At the hospital, doctors ran test after test. Hours passed. Finally, a physician sat beside my bed. The good news is, your heart looks fine. I exhaled. You've been exhausted. I've been under stress. I believe it. He recommended fluids rest and observation overnight. Rachel refused to leave. She stayed beside my bed almost the entire day. She brushed my hair back, adjusted my blanket, held my hand. If someone had walked into that room, they would have seen a devoted daughter caring for her elderly mother. Even I started wondering if I had imagined everything. Late that evening, Mark arrived. He carried flowers. Too many flowers. He smiled at me. You gave us quite a scare. I'm sorry. No apology needed. He lowered his voice. I actually brought something. He removed several papers from a folder. I've been thinking about emergencies. Rachel looked uncomfortable. Mark continued. If something ever happens again, someone should be able to make medical decisions quickly. He placed the papers on the tray beside my bed. A temporary medical authorization. I picked up the first page. I'll read these later. No rush. His smile remained, but I noticed his fingers tapping the folder impatiently. I never sign anything in a hospital. Daniel used to say that. Mark chuckled. Fair enough. He gathered the papers. We'll talk another time. A nurse entered a few minutes later. Mark and Rachel stepped into the hallway. I closed my eyes. Not because I was asleep, because I didn't want them to know I was listening. At first they whispered. Then Mark's voice became sharper. We can't wait much longer. Rachel answered quietly. My mother is in the hospital. So this isn't the time. It has to be. What if she hears us? She won't. There was a long silence. Then Mark spoke again. They're not giving me another extension. My heartbeat quickened. Extension? Rachel sounded frightened. They said they'd come to the house. I know. I can't do this now. You don't have a choice. The hallway fell silent. Footsteps moved away. I opened my eyes slowly. Who was coming to the house? Who was threatening Mark? And why did it sound as though whatever they feared had a deadline? As I stared at the ceiling above my hospital bed, I realized something that chilled me even more than waking up on the kitchen floor. Rachel wasn't the one making decisions anymore. Someone else was. And whoever controlled Mark was slowly pulling my daughter away from me. I barely slept that night. Not because of the hospital monitors. Not because nurses came in every few hours. I stayed awake because of the conversation I had overheard. We can't wait much longer. They'll come to the house. Those words replayed in my mind again and again. Who were they? Banks collectors? Someone far worse. By morning, the doctor smiled as he reviewed my chart. Your blood pressure is much better. Can I go home? This afternoon. Rachel looked relieved. Oh, thank goodness. She squeezed my hand. For a second, I saw the little girl who used to climb into my lap after nightmares. The little girl who cried when her goldfish died. The little girl who believed her father could fix anything. Then that image disappeared. She glanced toward my left hand, toward the ring. The room suddenly felt colder. Around noon, another nurse came to check my medication. Rachel stood beside the bed. You should try to rest, Mom. I will. I'll be right here. She sounded gentle, loving, patient. I closed my eyes, not because I wanted to sleep, because I wanted to see what she would do if she believed I already had. The room became quiet. Footsteps moved across the floor. A chair scraped softly. I heard Rachel sigh. Several seconds passed. Then, I felt warm fingers wrap around my left hand. Carefully, slowly, almost tenderly. The touch reminded me of the day Daniel placed that ring on my finger. Only this time, the hand wasn't giving. It was taking. Rachel twisted the ring once, twice. It slid over my knuckle. I felt cool air against the skin that had worn a wedding ring for 43 years. She stopped for a moment. I could almost hear her breathing. Then came the whisper I will never forget. It's finally mine. My chest tightened so hard I thought my heart might give out. Not because she had taken the ring, because she smiled while doing it. I wanted to open my eyes. I wanted to ask, Rachel, when did you become this person instead? I remained completely still. Another sound followed, the zipper of her purse. The ring disappeared inside. Then, something happened that hurt even more. She leaned down and kissed my forehead. I love you, Mom. The words nearly broke me. How could love and betrayal exist in the same breath? A nurse pushed open the door. Rachel stepped back immediately. She slept the whole time, Rachel said softly. The nurse smiled. That's good. Rachel nodded. I'll get her discharge papers. Her footsteps faded down the hallway. Only then did I open my eyes. The ring was gone. My hand looked strangely empty. 43 years, gone in less than 10 seconds. I stared at my bare finger. Then I laughed, quietly, bitterly, because Rachel had just stolen something that wasn't worth stealing. Daniel had been right. The fake ring had done its job. It had protected the real one, even now, even from our own family. That afternoon, Rachel drove me home. She talked the entire ride. You'll need to drink more water. I know. You shouldn't lift anything. I won't. And promise you'll call me if you feel dizzy. I promise. She sounded like the perfect daughter. If someone had listened from outside the car, they would have admired her. Only I knew what rested inside her purse. When we reached my house, she helped me inside. She unpacked groceries, straightened pillows, made tea. Then she suddenly frowned. Mom? What? Your ring. I looked at my hand. Oh. It isn't there. No. When did you notice? I watched her carefully. She was acting. Very well. I don't know. Her eyes widened. Oh my goodness. She began looking everywhere. The kitchen counter, the bathroom sink, my bedroom. She searched places where she knew the ring could not possibly be. Then she called the hospital. I listened from the living room. Hi, my mother was discharged today. Pause. Yes. Pause. She lost her wedding ring. Another pause. It means everything to her. She even sounded emotional. When she hung up, she walked over and hugged me. I'm so sorry. I hugged her back because despite everything, she was still my daughter. I know you'll find it, she whispered. Would she? Or had she already found exactly what she wanted? An hour later, Mark arrived. He acted even more outraged. This is unbelievable. He slapped his hand against the kitchen counter. Hospitals are supposed to protect patients. Rachel nodded. We're calling again tomorrow. Mark turned toward me. Samantha, don't worry. We'll get it back. I almost admired how convincing he sounded. Almost. After dinner, they finally left. The house became silent again. I locked the front door. Then I walked straight to the hallway closet. Behind several old board games sat the cedar box that held Daniel's notebook. I opened it. Inside was another small notebook. This one was blank. Daniel used it years ago for repair estimates. I carried it into the kitchen. Then I began writing. Date, time, hospital room number. Rachel removed the ring at approximately 12:14 p.m. She believed I was asleep. She placed it inside a black leather purse. She whispered, It's finally mine. I wrote every detail, every movement, every word, if memory ever failed me. The notebook wouldn't. Then I reached for my phone. There was only one person I trusted completely. Walter. He answered on the second ring. Everything okay? No. What happened? I took a slow breath. My ring is gone. Silence. Then, what do you mean gone? I watched Rachel take it. Walter didn't speak for several seconds. Finally, he asked quietly, Did she know you were awake? No. Did you stop her? No. Another long silence. Then he said something unexpected. Good. I blinked. Good. If she believes she succeeded. He paused. She'll show you why she wanted it. I understood immediately. If I confronted Rachel now, she would deny everything. She would become more careful. But if she believed I knew nothing, she would make her next move, and that next move might finally tell me the truth. I hate this, I whispered. I know. She's my daughter. I know. What if I'm wrong? Walter answered gently. If you were wrong, your ring would still be on your finger. After we hung up, I walked into my bedroom. The indentation on my finger was still visible where the ring had rested for decades. I touched it. It felt strangely empty. But then I remembered something Daniel used to tell me whenever he repaired old clocks. The missing piece always tells you where to look. Rachel thought she had taken the most valuable thing I owned. She had no idea. The real treasure had never left its hiding place, and for the first time since Daniel died, I realized I wasn't just grieving anymore. I was waiting to discover what my daughter would do, now that she believed she had won. The morning after Rachel stole my ring, I made myself one promise. I would not accuse her. Not yet. Walter was right. If Rachel believed I knew nothing, she would eventually reveal why she had risked everything. So I waited. Waiting turned out to be harder than I expected. Every time my phone rang, I wondered if it was Rachel. Every time she smiled at me, I wondered if she was thinking about the ring hidden inside her purse. 3 days passed. Then Walter called. I saw Rachel this morning. My heart skipped. Where? Downtown. Doing what? I don't know yet. What do you mean? I was getting coffee near High Street. He paused. I saw her walk into Donovan Estate Jewelry. I immediately recognized the name. Claire Donovan owned one of the most respected appraisal businesses in Columbus. People didn't go there to resize wedding bands. They went there to learn what valuable things were worth. Rachel wasn't keeping the ring. She intended to sell it. The realization hurt more than I expected. Not because of the money, because the ring represented her father's entire life. Walter continued. I stayed across the street. You followed her. I watched. How long? Almost 40 minutes. What happened? I couldn't hear anything. He sighed. But she came out looking angry. That surprised me. Angry, not relieved. Something hadn't gone according to plan. I think you should talk to Claire. I can't ask her about another customer's business. You don't have to. Then what? Tell her the truth. I spent nearly an hour staring at my phone before dialing. A receptionist answered. Donovan Estate Jewelry. My name is Samantha Flores. How may I help you? I need to speak with Claire Donovan. May I ask why? It concerns a family heirloom. Several minutes later, another voice came on. This is Claire. She sounded professional, calm. I understand you wanted to speak with me. Yes. I hesitated. I believe someone may have brought you a wedding ring that belongs to me. Silence. I'm sorry, Claire replied gently. I can't discuss customer information. I understand. I took a deep breath. But if I describe the ring, I'm still limited. I know. I'm not asking you to break the law. She waited. I only need to know one thing. What is that? Has someone recently asked you to appraise a simple gold wedding ring with a small round diamond and engraving inside the band? Another long silence. I can't confirm that. I thought so. I was about to end the call. Then Claire surprised me. Mrs. Flores. Yes. If you truly believe property belonging to you has been stolen, you should file a police report. I don't want that. You don't? No. Why? Because the person who took it is my daughter. Claire became very quiet. Finally, she spoke softly. I see, I continued. My husband died 4 years ago. The ring means more than money. I'm sorry for your loss. I don't want anyone arrested. I only want the truth. There was another pause. Then Claire asked one careful question. Can you prove the ring belongs to you? Yes. I have photographs dating back decades. I also have our wedding pictures. One moment. She placed me on hold. When she returned, her voice had changed. I can't discuss everything. I understand. But if you email proof of ownership, I can verify whether the item presented matched your description. Within minutes, I sent wedding photographs, family pictures, and a copy of Daniel's obituary that showed us wearing the ring. An hour later, Claire called back. I've reviewed the documents. And the ring presented matched your photographs. So it was Rachel. Claire ignored the name. I can confirm someone recently requested an appraisal. My stomach tightened. What happened? The client expected a very different result. Different how? Claire chose her words carefully. The ring has sentimental value. I smiled sadly. Yes, but it does not have significant commercial value. Exactly as Daniel had planned. So the appraisal, the metal was ordinary. The stone was not a natural diamond. I closed my eyes. It was zirconia. Yes. The estimated market value was only a few $100s. I almost laughed. Rachel had stolen a fake ring worth less than the television in her living room. But then Claire said something unexpected. The client's reaction concerned me. What do you mean? She became extremely upset. Angry? More frightened than angry. Frightened. She kept saying. Claire stopped herself. What? I probably shouldn't repeat it. Please? Another pause. She said, this can't be right. I held my breath. Claire continued. Then she asked me to test it again. I did. The results didn't change. What happened next? She asked whether another jeweler might disagree. And I told her any qualified appraiser would reach the same conclusion. My heart raced. Rachel hadn't expected disappointment. She had expected rescue. Claire added one more detail. Before she left? Yes. She made a phone call. Did you hear it? Only part. What did she say? Claire thought for a moment. I heard her say, it isn't worth anything. Then, no, she must have switched it. My blood froze. Switched it. Rachel believed I had switched the ring. She had no idea the switch happened 20 years earlier. Mrs. Flores. Claire interrupted my thoughts. Are you still there? Yes. I'm here. I hope your family finds peace. So do I. After hanging up, I sat alone in my kitchen. Rachel wasn't celebrating. She wasn't spending money. She was panicking. The fake ring had ruined someone's plan. Someone who had expected a fortune. An hour later, Walter came over. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, He folded his arms. That's interesting. What is... Rachel didn't steal the ring because she wanted jewelry. I know. She needed money. But for what? Walter looked out the window. That's the question. Just then my phone buzzed. Rachel, I answered. Hi, sweetheart. Her voice sounded strained. Mom. Yes? I've been thinking about your ring. I miss it. So do I. She hesitated. I still can't believe the hospital lost it. Neither can I. I know. If someone found it? Yes. Would you still want it back? The question was strange. Very strange, of course. What if it wasn't worth much? I felt my pulse quicken. There it was. The first crack. I answered carefully. It isn't valuable because of money. It belonged to your father? Rachel became silent. Finally, she whispered, Right. Then she quickly changed the subject. I'll stop by tomorrow. I'd like that. When the call ended, Walter looked at me. She knows. What? She knows something doesn't add up. I nodded. So do I. Rachel thought I had tricked her. She had no idea. The only person who had planned 20 years ahead was Daniel. And somewhere, someone was waiting for money that Rachel could no longer deliver. After my conversation with Claire, one thing became clear. Rachel hadn't stolen my ring because she wanted to own it. She had stolen it because she believed someone was waiting for money. The question was, who? The answer came sooner than I expected. The next afternoon, Rachel came to my house. She looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded her eyes. Her makeup couldn't hide them. Neither could her smile. You look tired, I said. I haven't been sleeping. Everything okay? She forced a laugh. Just work. I knew she was lying. While I made coffee, she wandered through the kitchen. Not looking at me, looking around. Almost as if she expected to discover something she had missed before. She opened the refrigerator, closed it, looked out the window, then finally sat down. I placed a cup in front of her. You've barely touched your coffee. I know. Something's bothering you. She looked up. For a second, I thought she might tell me everything. Instead, she smiled. I'm fine. The smile lasted only a heartbeat. Then her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen. Every bit of color disappeared from her face. I should take this. She walked onto my back porch. The kitchen window was slightly open. I never intended to listen, but her voice carried inside. I told you. Silence. No. Another pause. I'm trying. Then she whispered something that made my stomach tighten. Please stop coming to the house. House. Not my house. Hers. When she came back inside, she looked even paler. Everything okay? I asked. Wrong number. Wrong number. At 68 years old, I had learned one important lesson. People who say wrong number never look terrified afterward. She left only 10 minutes later. As soon as her car disappeared, I called Walter. I think someone is threatening Rachel. I've been thinking the same thing. What do you mean? I did a little digging. Walter wasn't the type to gossip. If he investigated something, he had a reason. What did you find? Mark hasn't been working. I frowned. What? The construction company he worked for let him go months ago. Rachel told me he was waiting on commissions. There aren't any commissions. He doesn't have the job anymore. I sat down slowly. Does Rachel know? I don't think so. That explained a lot. The expensive house, the constant talk about money, the panic. Walter continued. I also ran into an old friend at City Hall. And he mentioned there have been notices filed against Mark. What kind? Late mortgage payments. I closed my eyes. Daniel had always said, debt grows quietly until one morning it starts knocking on your door. Apparently, that morning had arrived. The next surprise came 2 days later. I went to the grocery store. As I loaded bags into my trunk, someone called my name. Samantha! I turned. It was Linda Brooks, Rachel's neighbor. We hadn't spoken in months. We hugged. Then she asked a simple question. How's Rachel doing? I think she's fine. Linda hesitated. I hope so. What do you mean? She looked uncomfortable. I probably shouldn't say anything. What happened? Linda lowered her voice. There have been people stopping by. What people? I don't know. They don't look friendly. They've knocked on Rachel's door several times. When? The last couple of weeks. They usually come at night. I felt cold despite the summer heat. What do they want? I've never heard. But one night, she stopped. What? I heard shouting. What kind of shouting? A man's voice. He kept saying, You owe us. I thanked Linda and drove home without remembering the drive. Debt, threats, hospital hallway conversations, Claire's appraisal. Everything was beginning to fit together, except one piece. Rachel. Was she a willing participant, or was she trapped? That evening, she called again. Mom, hi, sweetheart. What are you doing? Watching television. There was a long silence. Finally, she asked, Can I ask you something? Anything? If? She stopped. If what? If Dad were alive? Yes. What would he do if someone made a terrible mistake? My heart broke. He'd ask why. Even if it hurt him. Especially then. She began crying, very quietly. I had not heard my daughter cry like that since Daniel's funeral. I miss him. So do I. I wish he were here. So do I. Another silence. Then she whispered, I've made everything worse. Before I could answer, another voice exploded through the phone. A man's voice. Mark, who are you talking to? Rachel quickly lowered her voice. I have to go. The call ended. I stared at the phone. Walter was right. Something had changed. Rachel wasn't controlling the situation anymore. Mark was. The following morning, Walter arrived carrying a folder. I found something else. Inside were copies of public court records. Mark Bennett, credit card lawsuit, past due taxes, vehicle repossession. There were more papers than I expected. This can't all be recent. It isn't. How long? Walter looked at me. Almost 3 years. 3 years? That meant Mark had been hiding financial problems long before Daniel died, long before Rachel stole my ring. Then Walter pointed to another page. This one matters. I read it twice, then a third time. It showed a civil judgment against Mark from a local casino. I looked up. He gambled. Walter nodded. And lost. How much? I don't know. But enough. Everything suddenly made sense. The disappearing money. The fake stories about commissions. The pressure. The fear. The strange people at Rachel's house. Mark hadn't invested badly. He had gambled. And every lie afterward had only buried them deeper. I leaned back in my chair. Rachel hadn't stolen my ring because she wanted luxury. She believed it was the only way to save her husband. That realization didn't excuse what she had done, but it explained why she had looked terrified instead of greedy when Claire told her the ring was worthless. She wasn't trying to become rich. She was trying to stop disaster. Walter folded the papers. What are you thinking? I answered honestly. I'm angry. I know. But I'm also scared. For Rachel? Yes. And for whatever Mark has gotten them into. Walter nodded. One more thing. What? If Mark is desperate enough to convince Rachel to steal... He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Because I already understood. If stealing one ring failed, he wouldn't stop there. He would simply start looking for something else, something bigger, something he believed was still hidden, and for the first time. I wondered whether Daniel's real secret was no longer safe. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about one sentence. If stealing one ring failed, Mark won't stop. The words echoed through my empty house. Daniel had spent his entire life fixing broken clocks. But before he died, he had quietly repaired something much more important. He had protected our family. Now it was my turn. The next morning, I drove to the old watch shop. It had been rented to another business for almost 3 years, but I still owned the building. The new tenant knew me well. When I explained that I needed to retrieve a few personal belongings from the old storage room, he handed me the spare key without asking questions. Walter insisted on coming. I'm not letting you do this alone. We walked through the narrow hallway behind the shop. The smell hit me first. Old wood, machine oil, dust. Nothing had changed. For one beautiful moment, I could almost imagine Daniel standing behind his workbench, wearing his magnifying glasses, while repairing another antique clock. Walter broke the silence. You okay? I smiled sadly. I've never stopped missing him. The storage room was exactly as Daniel had left it. Shelves lined the walls, boxes labeled in his neat handwriting, clock parts, old tools, invoices. Most people would have seen clutter. I saw memories. Walter quietly searched another shelf while I walked toward the large oak cabinet Daniel had built himself. He had always called it his organized mess. I smiled despite myself. Then I remembered something. 20 years ago, Daniel had stood beside this very cabinet. He had smiled the same mysterious smile. I hope you never need this. I knelt on the floor. My fingers slid underneath the lowest drawer. There, the hidden latch. Exactly where he had shown me decades ago. I pressed gently. A soft click echoed through the room. Walter looked over. You found it. I think so. The false bottom lifted slowly. Inside rested a small metal box. My hands trembled, not from fear, from memory. Daniel had touched this box. His fingerprints had once rested exactly where mine rested now. The key was still where he said it would be. Inside the old family Bible on the highest shelf. I opened the Bible. The tiny brass key remained tucked between the pages of Psalms, exactly where Daniel had hidden it. I laughed softly. Some things never change. Walter smiled. Open it. The lock turned easily. Inside lay 3 things: the real wedding ring, a folded envelope, a sealed appraisal report. For a long moment, I simply stared. The real ring sparkled differently, not brighter, warmer, as though 43 years of memories still lived inside it. I slipped it into my palm. It felt heavier than the copy. He kept his promise, Walter whispered. Yes. I carefully unfolded the appraisal. The document confirmed what Daniel had once told me. Natural antique diamond, original handcrafted setting, historically valuable. The estimated value surprised me. It was certainly worth a significant amount. Enough to tempt desperate people, but not enough to magically erase every financial problem. Mark had believed the ring would solve everything. He had been wrong from the beginning. Then I picked up the envelope. On the front, Daniel had written only 4 words. For Samantha, if needed. I recognized his handwriting instantly. My eyes filled with tears before I even opened it. Inside was a letter. I began reading aloud. My dearest Samantha, if you are reading this, it means life has taken a turn neither of us wanted. Maybe I'm gone. Maybe circumstances forced you to open the box we hoped would stay closed forever. If that's true, I need you to remember something. This ring is precious, but not because of the diamond. The stone can be replaced, the gold can be melted, the memories cannot. I stopped reading for a moment. Walter quietly looked away, giving me privacy. I continued. When I made the copy years ago, I wasn't protecting jewelry. I was protecting you. Money changes people, sometimes slowly, sometimes overnight. Even good people can become frightened enough to make terrible choices. If that day ever comes, don't judge too quickly. Fear speaks louder than love in desperate moments. I swallowed hard. Daniel had described Rachel without ever knowing what would happen. The letter continued. If someone someday proves they love this ring more for its price than for its meaning, don't give them the real one. Wait. Time reveals character better than anger ever will. My hands began shaking. There was one final paragraph. If Rachel is the one reading this beside you someday, tell her I never measured her worth by her mistakes, but don't spare her from the consequences of those mistakes either. Love without honesty isn't love, it's weakness. Only give her this ring when she understands the difference. I lowered the letter. Neither Walter nor I spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, he broke the silence. He knew? No. I smiled sadly. He understood people. Walter nodded. That's even harder. I carefully placed the letter back inside its envelope. Then I looked again at the real ring. I remembered Rachel as a little girl. She loved pretending to wear my jewelry. She would slide my wedding ring onto her tiny thumb and giggle. One day, I'll have one like yours. Daniel always answered, I hope yours means as much. Neither of us had imagined that one day she would steal it, or think she had. Walter interrupted my thoughts. What will you do now? I already knew the answer. I'm not selling it. Even if it could help Rachel. I looked down at Daniel's letter. If I erase every consequence, she'll never learn why this happened. Walter nodded slowly. Daniel would agree. I think so too. We locked the box again, but this time I didn't put it back into the cabinet. Instead, I carried it with me. On our way out of the shop, I looked back one final time. The workbench, the old clock, the faded calendar still hanging on the wall. For a moment, I almost heard Daniel's voice. Old things deserve patience. I finally understood what he had meant all those years. He wasn't talking about clocks. He wasn't even talking about marriage. He was talking about people. People break, people fail, people lose themselves, but if there is enough honesty, sometimes they can be repaired. That afternoon, Walter drove with me to the bank. We rented a safe deposit box. I placed the real ring inside, along with Daniel's letter. The metal door closed with a heavy click. Only then did I breathe easier. Mark could search every drawer in my house. He could tear down every wall. He would never find what he was looking for. As we walked back to the parking lot, Walter stopped. Samantha. What? If Mark realizes the first ring was fake? He will. Then he'll assume the real one still exists. I looked toward the bank behind us. I know. And desperate men become dangerous. I stared across the parking lot. The afternoon sun reflected off dozens of windshields. For the first time since Daniel died, I wasn't afraid of losing the ring. I was afraid of what Mark might do. Once he realized he had failed. Once the real ring was secure at the bank, I turned my attention to the greater danger. Mark's debts. A locked box could protect a diamond. It could not protect my daughter from a husband who had built their marriage on lies. 2 days later, Rachel came to my house carrying a thick stack of envelopes. She placed them on the kitchen table. "I need your help." It was the first honest sentence she had spoken to me in weeks. I pulled out the chair beside me. "Sit down." Rachel looked toward the hallway. "Is Walter here?" No good. Why Mark doesn't like him. That told me more than she realized. I touched the envelopes. "What are these bills? All of them I don't know." Her voice cracked. "I found them in Mark's desk." I opened the first envelope. It was a collection notice. The next was a credit card statement, then a late mortgage warning. The amount owed was worse than I expected. "Rachel, how long has this been happening?" He said only a few months. He lied. I know. "Do you?" She flinched. I regretted the sharpness in my voice, but I did not apologize. Rachel needed comfort. She also needed truth. She pushed another folder toward me. "There are loans in my name. Did you apply for them?" "I don't remember." I opened the folder. 3 online loans, a home equity application, a new credit card. Each document carried Rachel's name. Each carried her signature. She stared at the papers. I must have signed something without reading it. "Do these signatures look like yours?" She picked up the home equity form. At first she said nothing. Then she whispered, "No." I moved closer. Her normal signature had a tall, narrow R. The signature on the loan had a wide loop. It looked close enough to fool a stranger, not close enough to fool her mother. "Mark signed this," I said. Rachel shook her head immediately. "He wouldn't." "You just said it isn't your signature." "Maybe I signed quickly." "Rachel." She stood and walked to the window. "He wouldn't do that." "Why not?" "Because he loves me." I looked at her. Love had become the word she used whenever facts became too painful. Daniel loved me. He never needed to steal my identity to prove it. I kept my voice calm. "Call the lender. Now. Now." Rachel hesitated. Then she dialed the number printed on the statement. After answering several security questions, she asked when the loan had been opened. Her face slowly changed. "What email address was used?" She listened. "That isn't mine." Another pause. "What phone number?" Her hand began shaking. "That's my husband's number." She ended the call without saying goodbye. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she sat down. "He used my social security number." "Yes." "He signed my name." "Yes. I could lose everything." "You already are." The words sounded cruel, but pretending otherwise would have been crueler. Rachel covered her face. I wanted to hold her. Instead, I waited. After a while, she lowered her hands. "Mark said the ring would fix it." There it was. Not the whole truth. But the door had finally opened. "What exactly did he tell you?" She stared at the bare place on my finger. "He said Dad's ring was worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Why would he believe that he found a paper?" "What paper at Dad's old shop?" My suspicion had been right. Rachel continued. "When we cleared the storage room, Mark found an appraisal inside a folder." "Did you see it?" "Yes." What did it say? That the diamond was antique and valuable. How valuable, she swallowed. The old estimate was almost $90,000. That was close to the current appraisal. But Mark had made one dangerous assumption. He believed the ring I wore every day was the same ring described in that document. What happened to the paper? Mark kept it. Why he said we might need it for a sale. I studied my daughter's face. Rachel, when did he first suggest taking my ring? She looked down. A month before you went to the hospital. My chest tightened. So it was planned. He didn't call it stealing. What did he call it? Rachel, when did he first suggest taking my ring? She looked down. A month before you went to the hospital. My chest tightened. So it was planned. He didn't call it stealing. What did he call it, borrowing my inheritance early? I laughed once. There was no humor in it. I am still alive. I know. Did you know that when you removed it from my hand, tears filled her eyes? She looked at me sharply. For one dangerous second, I thought she realized I had been awake, but I kept my expression still. She answered carefully. I'm speaking hypothetically? No, you aren't. Rachel stood. I should go. Sit down. I can't. You came here for help. She looked trapped. I came here because I don't understand the loans. You understand more than you want to admit. She began pacing. Mark said the people he owes are dangerous. How dangerous they sent pictures of our house. Did you call the police? He said that would make it worse. Of course he did. He told me if we sold the ring, we could pay them and start over. And you believed him? I was scared. So you chose to deceive me. I thought you would say no. You never asked. Mark said you wouldn't help. The sentence stopped me. He said you cared more about Dad's possessions than whether we lost our home. I felt anger rise inside me. Not at Rachel, at the man who had isolated her from anyone who might challenge his lies. He wanted you afraid of me. Rachel said nothing. He wanted you to believe stealing was your only choice. He didn't force me. No. I held her gaze. He manipulated you, but you still made the decision. She began crying. I know. For a moment, I believed she would confess everything. The hospital, the ring, the appraisal, the lie. Instead, she wiped her face and reached for the folders. I need time. Time for what to think. Mark has had 3 years to think. He used that time to bury you in debt. She stopped at the door. Please don't tell him I showed you these. Why? Because I don't know what he'll do. That frightened me more than any threat from a stranger. My daughter was afraid of her own husband. After she left, I called Walter. He arrived that evening with an old friend named Robert Ellis, a retired bank manager. Robert did not access private records. He simply explained what the documents meant. If these signatures were forged, he said Rachel needs a lawyer and a formal fraud report. Can the loans be challenged? I asked. Possibly, but she must stop protecting the person who did this. That was the problem. Rachel was beginning to see Mark clearly, but she was still standing between him and the consequences. Before Robert left, he pointed to one detail on the home equity application. The mailing address was not Rachel's house. It was a private mailbox across town. Mark had made sure the statements would never reach her. This was not a desperate mistake. It was a system. That night, It was a system. That night, Rachel called me again. Her voice was barely audible. Mom! Yes, did Dad ever hide anything else? I closed my eyes. There it was. Mark was already looking beyond the fake Renji. What do you mean, other jewelry? Called me again. Her voice was barely audible. Mom, yes, did Dad ever hide anything else? I closed my eyes. There it was. Mark was already looking beyond the fake ring. What do you mean, other jewelry? Cash. Anything valuable? I answered slowly. Why are you asking? Mark thinks the ring was switched. Does he? He says the real one must be somewhere. I looked toward the dark hallway, at the house where Daniel and I had built our life. Rachel. Yes. If Mark comes into my home looking for something, I paused. I will not protect him. She began to cry again. Then she whispered, I don't think you should. The call ended. It was the closest she had come to choosing the truth. But she still had not admitted what she had done. So I made a decision. I would give Rachel one final chance to tell me herself. And I would give Mark exactly what he wanted. A reason to believe Daniel had hidden something valuable inside my house. The trap had to look natural. If Mark suspected I knew the truth, he would disappear. If Rachel suspected I was testing her, she might warn him. So Walter and I agreed on one simple rule. No lies that could hurt anyone. Only one carefully placed truth wrapped inside a harmless story. 3 days later, I invited Rachel and Mark to dinner. Mark accepted immediately. That alone told me he still believed there was something valuable left to find. When they arrived, I acted exactly as I always had. I cooked Daniel's favorite pot roast. Rachel helped set the table. Mark complimented the smell. For almost an hour, we talked about ordinary things. Weather, television, Walter's new fishing boat. Nothing important. Then I casually mentioned the old watch shop. I stopped by the storage room this week. Mark looked up. Oh, there were still so many of Daniel's things? Rachel smiled sadly. I miss that place. So do I. I let a few seconds pass, then I sighed. It reminded me of something Daniel once told me. Mark's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. What was that? I shrugged. He said he had hidden another little box somewhere. Neither of them moved. I continued eating. Rachel frowned. What kind of box? I honestly don't remember. I shook my head as if frustrated with my own memory. I'm getting older. Mark leaned forward. What was inside? I can't remember. Rachel laughed softly. Mom? I'm serious. I remember Daniel saying something about a compartment in his study. Walter had suggested I use the study instead of the shop. If Mark searched the shop, innocent tenants could become involved. The study was inside my own home. Safe, controlled. I continued. I was going to ask Walter to help me look next weekend. I reached for my water. But maybe I'm imagining things. Mark forced a smile. Memories can be tricky. They certainly can. The conversation moved on, but Mark barely spoke for the rest of dinner. His mind was somewhere else. After they left, Walter called. How did it go? He took the bait. You sure? He hardly touched dessert. Walter laughed. Then he's thinking. Exactly. The next morning, we put the second part of the plan into motion. Walter installed small security cameras inside my house, only in the common areas. The front entry, the hallway, Daniel's old study, the living room. Nothing invasive, nothing illegal. If he comes, Walter said, we'll know. What if he doesn't? He will. You sound confident. Walter smiled. Desperate people hate unfinished treasure hunts. I also changed a few things. Every important document went into the bank. Daniel's letter stayed inside the safe deposit box. The real ring remained locked away. Only ordinary household items stayed in the house. Then Walter built one final piece of the trap. A wooden box. Old. Dusty. Exactly the kind of thing someone might believe had been forgotten for decades. Inside, he placed 3 broken pocket watches. Nothing valuable. Nothing sentimental. Just enough to disappoint someone searching for riches. Saturday arrived. I called Rachel that morning. I'll be spending tonight with my sister in Dayton. You will? I haven't seen her in months. That's nice. I'll ask Walter to stop by tomorrow and help me search the study. I purposely spoke loudly. I knew Mark was somewhere nearby. I could hear him moving in the background. Rachel replied, "Have fun, Mom." "I will." Instead of driving to Dayton, Walter picked me up. We parked half a mile away near his house. The camera system sent live video directly to his laptop. Now we waited. Nothing happened. For 3 hours. The sun disappeared. Streetlights turned on. I started wondering if we had been wrong. Then, at 8:43 p.m., motion appeared on the screen. A pickup truck stopped across the street from my house. Mark stepped out, alone. He looked around carefully. "No, Rachel," Walter whispered. "No." Mark walked toward my porch. He didn't knock. He reached into his pocket. I felt my stomach tighten. "He still has the spare key." Walter nodded. "The one Rachel asked you for?" "No, the old one." Years ago, before Daniel died, we had briefly trusted Mark with one while we were on vacation. I had forgotten about it. The door opened. Mark slipped inside. No hesitation, no uncertainty. He knew exactly where he was going. Straight toward Daniel's study. Walter enlarged the video. Mark wore gloves, black leather gloves. He carried a flashlight, despite every light in the house working perfectly. "He planned this," Walter said quietly. "Yes." Mark searched quickly. Desk drawers, bookshelves, cabinets. He ignored family photographs, ignored furniture, ignored everything that had emotional value. He wanted only money, or whatever he believed could become money. Then he knelt beside the old bookcase. Exactly where I had suggested the hidden compartment might be. He searched every shelf. Nothing. He cursed under his breath. Next, he crawled beneath Daniel's desk. Still nothing. 20 minutes passed. Finally, he noticed the loose floorboard Walter had prepared. He smiled. Even through the grainy camera, I could see the excitement on his face. He lifted the board, pulled out the wooden box. "There it is," Walter whispered. Mark opened it. His smile vanished instantly. Broken watches. Nothing else. He threw one across the room. It shattered against the wall. The second followed. Then the third. My chest tightened. Those watches were worthless. But Daniel had repaired them years ago. Watching Mark destroy them still hurt. Then something unexpected happened. Mark became angry. Very angry. He grabbed the framed wedding photograph hanging above Daniel's desk. The picture of our wedding day. The one where Daniel looked at me instead of the camera. Mark ripped it off the wall. The glass exploded across the floor. "No!" I whispered. Walter reached for his phone. "Not yet." Before he could dial, another car pulled into my driveway. Rachel. She rushed toward the front door. Apparently, she had been unable to reach Mark. She walked inside. Seconds later, we heard shouting through the camera microphone. "Mark!" He spun around. "What are you doing here?" "What are you doing?" "You followed me. You left your phone." Rachel looked around the room. Broken glass, open drawers, destroyed watches, the empty wooden box. Her face turned white. "You broke into my mother's house." "I'm trying to save us." "No. You've lost your mind." Mark pointed toward the floor. "She lied. There has to be something else." Rachel shook her head. "There isn't. You don't know that." He pushed past her and began opening more drawers. Rachel grabbed his arm. "Stop." He jerked free. She stumbled backward, not violently, but enough. Walter picked up his phone. "I'm calling the police." I nodded. "Do it." Meanwhile, Rachel stood between Mark and Daniel's desk. "You need to leave." "I'm not leaving empty-handed." There is nothing here. Your father hid something. My father is dead. And your mother is lying. Rachel stared at him for the first time. She looked at her husband the way I had looked at him weeks earlier, not with love, with disbelief, as though she were seeing a stranger. Police sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Mark heard them too. His head snapped toward the window. You called them. Rachel didn't answer. She simply stepped farther in front of Daniel's desk, blocking his way, choosing a side, not completely. Not yet, but enough to stop him from taking another step. Walter closed the laptop. It's started. I looked at the dark screen. No, I thought quietly. It's finally ending. I reached my house just as 2 police cruisers pulled into the driveway. Blue lights flashed across the broken window of Daniel's study. For one brief moment, I couldn't move. That room had been Daniel's favorite place in the world. Now it looked like a crime scene. Walter rested a hand on my shoulder. Ready? No. He nodded. Neither am I. We walked toward the front door. Officer Laura Mitchell met us on the porch. She was calm, professional, and immediately recognized me. Mrs. Flores. Yes. I'm Detective Laura Mitchell. I'm sorry you had to come. We'll take it from here. She asked only one question before allowing me inside. Do you know the man who entered your home? I answered without hesitation. My son-in-law. Her expression changed. I'm sorry. So am I. Inside, Rachel sat on the living room sofa. She looked completely shattered. Mascara streaked her cheeks. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The moment she saw me, she stood. Mom? I looked at her, then past her. Mark stood in the hallway with an officer beside him. His hands were cuffed behind his back. For the first time since I had known him, he looked afraid. Not angry, afraid. Detective Mitchell asked me to describe what belonged in the study. I explained that the broken watches had little financial value. The framed wedding photograph had enormous sentimental value. She carefully photographed everything. Then she asked whether anything appeared missing. No. She looked surprised. Nothing. He didn't find what he was looking for. Mark looked directly at me. For just a second. There was no apology in his eyes, only frustration. Rachel noticed it too. She slowly turned toward her husband. What were you looking for? Mark didn't answer. She stepped closer. Answer me. Still nothing. Finally, Detective Mitchell spoke. You may answer her if you choose. Mark laughed bitterly. It doesn't matter now. Rachel's voice cracked. It matters to me. He looked at her. I was trying to save us. No. You were trying to save yourself. Silence filled the room. Then Rachel asked the question I had been waiting to hear. Did you lie to me? Mark looked away. She stepped closer. Did you lose the money gambling? Another silence. Finally? Yes. The word barely left his mouth. Rachel closed her eyes. When? A few years ago? A few? He didn't answer. How much? I don't know. You don't know? I stopped counting. She stared at him as though he were someone she had never met. What about the loans? No answer. The credit cards? Nothing. The mortgage? He remained silent. Rachel suddenly shouted, Did you forge my signature? The entire house became still. Even Detective Mitchell waited. Mark slowly lowered his head. Yes. Rachel stumbled backward. I instinctively reached for her. She didn't notice. You forged my name. I was going to pay everything back. When? After we sold the ring. She laughed. It wasn't laughter. It was heartbreak. There wasn't even a plan. There was. You stole my future. I was fixing it. No. Tears streamed down her face. You destroyed it. Then Mark said something that changed everything. If you had done what I asked... Rachel stared at him. None of this would have happened. My heartbeat stopped. Rachel whispered, What did you say? You heard me. You told me to take the ring. You agreed. You begged me. You still did it. Every word hit Rachel like another stone. She realized exactly what I had known for days. Mark had never intended to protect her. He had intended to use her. If the theft succeeded, he would get the money. If it failed, she would carry the blame. Rachel slowly shook her head. You planned that. You were my wife. You used me. I trusted you. You loved me. No. Her voice became stronger. I loved the man I thought you were. You... She pointed at him. I don't even know. Mark finally lost his temper. I did everything for this family. Rachel stepped forward. No. You did everything for yourself. Detective Mitchell quietly instructed the officers to take Mark outside. As they led him toward the door, he looked back one last time. At Rachel. You're making a mistake. Rachel answered without hesitation. No. I already made it. It was marrying you. The front door closed behind him. The silence afterward felt heavier than the shouting. Rachel slowly turned toward me. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she looked at my left hand, the finger where my ring should have been. Her shoulders collapsed. I need to tell you something. I already knew what was coming, but I waited because this confession had to belong to her, not to me. She walked closer. I took your ring. Walter quietly left the room. Detective Mitchell also stepped away, giving us privacy. Rachel's voice trembled. In the hospital. I thought you were asleep. She covered her mouth. I was so scared. I thought if I sold it, I could stop everything. She looked directly into my eyes. And when I took it, I smiled. Fresh tears rolled down her face. I smiled. I remember. She froze. What? I remember your smile? Her breathing stopped. I wasn't asleep. Rachel stared at me as though the world had disappeared beneath her feet. You saw me? Yes. You heard me. Every word. She took one step backward, then another. No. I kissed your forehead. I know. I told you I loved you. I know. You let me walk away. Yes. She covered her face with both hands. A sound escaped her that I had never heard before. Pure shame. Not fear. Not sadness. Shame. You gave me so many chances. Yes. I kept lying. Yes. She dropped to her knees. I'm sorry. The words echoed through the room. Not dramatic, not loud, just broken. I've never been more ashamed of myself. I looked down at my daughter, the same child whose tiny hand once fit inside mine. The same little girl Daniel taught to ride a bicycle. The same woman who had smiled while stealing my wedding ring. I can't ask you to forgive me. She wiped away tears. I don't deserve it. No. You don't. She nodded. I know, for the first time. She didn't defend herself. She didn't mention Mark. She didn't mention debt. She accepted responsibility. It didn't erase what she had done. But it changed something. She was finally telling the truth. And sometimes, the truth is the first small step back toward the people we almost lose forever. Rachel stayed at my house that night. Not because I invited her, because she had nowhere else she wanted to be. Mark remained in custody while Detective Laura Mitchell continued questioning him about the break-in, the forged financial documents, and several complaints that had begun surfacing after his arrest. The house felt strangely quiet. The same house that had witnessed so much pain now held only two exhausted women. Mother, daughter, separated by lies, connected by grief. Rachel barely slept. Around 3 a.m, I found her sitting alone in Daniel's study. The broken glass had already been cleaned. The damaged picture frame rested on the desk. She was holding the wedding photograph carefully. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I didn't ask who she was talking to. Me? Daniel? Perhaps both. I sat beside her. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, she looked at the photograph. "Dad always believed I could do anything?" "Yes." "I disappointed him." I shook my head. "You disappointed yourself." She nodded slowly. "I think that's worse." The sunrise came quietly. We drank coffee in silence. Then Rachel surprised me. "I want to tell the police everything." I looked at her. "Everything? Everything? Even your part, especially my part." Those words mattered, because real accountability begins where excuses end. Later that morning, Detective Mitchell arrived. She carried a notebook instead of handcuffs. "I understand you wish to make a statement." Rachel nodded. "I do." The interview lasted nearly 2 hours. Walter and I waited in the living room. When it was over, Detective Mitchell thanked Rachel for her cooperation. After Rachel stepped outside for fresh air, the detective sat beside me. "I wanted to explain where things stand." I appreciated her honesty. "Please." "Your daughter admitted removing your wedding ring." "Yes." "She also admitted believing it belonged to her eventually." "I know." "However," the detective paused, "the circumstances matter." "She cooperated voluntarily." "She returned before we requested another interview." "She has provided evidence regarding the financial fraud." I listened quietly. "Will she be charged?" Detective Mitchell answered carefully. "That decision belongs to the prosecutor, but her cooperation will certainly be considered." I nodded. "I understand." She closed her notebook. "I've seen many cases like this. Families, financial manipulation, coercion, emotional abuse. Your daughter still bears responsibility." "I know. But she also appears to have been controlled for a long time." After she left, Rachel returned inside. She looked emotionally drained. "How do you feel?" "Empty." "That's normal." She looked at me. "I expected you to be angry." "I am." She lowered her head. "But anger and love can exist together." Fresh tears filled her eyes. I didn't understand that before. Neither of us mentioned forgiveness. It was too soon. That afternoon, Walter brought lunch. He also brought news. "They searched Mark's truck." Rachel looked up immediately. "What did they find?" Walter unfolded a piece of paper. "Copies." "Copies of what?" "The old appraisal." Rachel closed her eyes. "I knew it." "There were also photographs." "What kind?" Walter hesitated. "Pictures of your mother's house. Different angles. Doors. Windows. The backyard." Rachel covered her mouth. "He planned everything." Walter nodded. "For quite a while." I wasn't surprised anymore, only saddened. Then Walter mentioned one final discovery. The police also found several fake signatures. Rachel looked confused. They're practicing signatures. Yours? And he looked toward me. Yours too. Silence filled the kitchen. Mark hadn't intended to stop with Rachel. Eventually, he had planned to forge my name as well. Rachel whispered, "I'm so sorry." I believed she meant it. That evening, we cleaned Daniel's study together. Not because it needed cleaning, because we both needed something to do with our hands. Rachel carefully repaired bookshelves. I replaced broken frames. At one point, she picked up Daniel's old magnifying glass. I remember this. He used to let me pretend I was fixing watches. I smiled. You usually made them worse. She laughed softly. So much worse. For the first time in weeks, the sound didn't hurt. It reminded me of the little girl she used to be. After dinner, she stopped beside the empty place on my finger. The ring. Yes. I know it wasn't the real one. I waited. I figured it out after Clara praised it. You never told me? I was too ashamed. She took a deep breath. Is the real one safe? I looked directly into her eyes. Yes. She nodded. I'm glad. She didn't ask where it was. She didn't ask how valuable it was. She simply said, I'm glad. That one sentence mattered more than she realized. Because weeks earlier, she would have asked a different question. How much is it worth? Now she only cared that it was safe. Late that night, I unlocked a drawer in my bedroom. Inside was Daniel's letter. Not the original. Just a handwritten copy I had made after leaving the bank. I handed it to Rachel. Your father wrote this. She stared at the envelope. For me, for both of us. She carefully unfolded the pages. I watched her face while she read. When she reached the paragraph about fear changing good people, she stopped. She read it again. Then she continued. Finally, she reached the last paragraph, the one Daniel had written decades before any of this happened. If Rachel is the one reading this beside you someday, tell her I never measured her worth by her mistakes. But don't spare her from the consequences of those mistakes either. Rachel began crying before she reached the final sentence. Only give her this ring when she understands the difference. She finished reading, then pressed the letter against her chest. He still believed in me. He hoped for you. I almost destroyed everything. You almost did. She nodded. I know. But he still loved me. So did I. She looked at me with disbelief. After everything, I answered honestly. I never stopped loving you. I stopped trusting you, but I never stopped loving you. Those two things were different. Rachel understood that. I could see it in her face. She walked around the table and hugged me, not the quick, polite hugs we had shared since Daniel died. A real hug, the kind a frightened child gives her mother. She cried into my shoulder for a long time. I cried too. Not because everything was fixed. Nothing was fixed. Trust doesn't return overnight. Families don't heal in a single conversation. But something impossible had finally happened. The lies had ended. Before going to bed, Rachel stopped in the hallway. Mom, yes, when all of this is over, if it ever is, I want to earn your trust again. I smiled sadly. You can't ask for trust. I know. You build it. She nodded. Then that's what I'll do. I watched her walk upstairs. For the first time since Daniel died, I believed she might actually mean it. Not because she said the right words, because for the first time, her actions had finally started matching them. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. Not peaceful, just quiet. Sometimes silence is louder than shouting. Rachel moved into the small guest room at my house while she searched for an apartment. She insisted on paying me rent. I refused. She insisted again. Finally, we compromised. Instead of paying rent, she would help repair everything that had been broken. It became our routine. Every morning, we worked together. She repainted the damaged walls in Daniel's study. I polished his old desk. Walter repaired the broken bookshelf. Little by little, the room began to look like itself again. One afternoon, Rachel carried the repaired wedding photograph into the study. The glass had been replaced, the wooden frame carefully restored. She handed it to me. I wanted to hang it. I nodded. Together, we placed it back on the wall, exactly where it had always been. She stepped back. "It looks right. It does." Then she quietly added, "I don't." I turned toward her. "What do you mean?" "I still don't recognize myself." I understood. Some mistakes don't disappear when they're forgiven. They stay with us, not to punish us forever, but to remind us who we never want to become again. Around that same time, Detective Laura Mitchell called. "I wanted to update you." I thanked her. "Mark has accepted a plea agreement." "What does that mean?" "He admitted to burglary, forgery, identity fraud, and several financial offenses." I closed my eyes. "What about Rachel?" The prosecutor reviewed her cooperation. "And no criminal charges." Relief washed over me, not because Rachel deserved to escape consequences. She hadn't, but because the legal system had recognized the difference between someone leading a crime and someone manipulated into joining it. Detective Mitchell continued, "That doesn't erase what happened." "I know, but it gives her a chance to rebuild." "Thank you." Before hanging up, she said something I never forgot. "Mrs. Flores?" "Yes. I've investigated many families. Very few survive something like this. I hope yours does." "So do I." A month later, Rachel asked me a question I hadn't expected. "Would you come with me?" "Where? To the bank?" I frowned. "Why?" "I need to close our joint accounts." I drove with her. Watching her sign the paperwork felt strangely emotional. Each signature represented another piece of freedom. No more hidden loans, no more secret debt, no more forged documents. When everything was finished, she looked exhausted. But lighter. "I finally know what belongs to me." "What?" "My name." On the drive home, she apologized again. Not dramatically. Not because she wanted reassurance. Simply because she needed to say it. "I know saying sorry doesn't fix anything." "No, but I needed you to hear it again." "I hear you. And I'll probably keep saying it." "I expect you will." We both smiled, a small smile, the kind that comes after surviving a storm, not before. Several days later, Walter stopped by carrying a small cardboard box. "I found these." Inside were dozens of old photographs from Daniel's watch shop. Rachel picked one up. She laughed softly. "Oh my goodness!" "What?" "Dad made me wear those giant repair goggles." I looked. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. The goggles covered half her face. Daniel stood beside her, smiling proudly. On the back of the photograph, Daniel had written one sentence: "Teaching her patience." Rachel stared at those words for a long time. Finally, she whispered, "I forgot who I used to be." "No," I answered gently. "You buried her." "She's still there." That evening, Rachel made dinner. She burned the rolls, overcooked the vegetables, forgot the salt. Daniel would have teased her endlessly. Instead, we laughed together. Real laughter. The kind we hadn't shared since before his funeral. After dinner, Rachel washed the dishes. Then she surprised me again. She handed me an envelope. "What's this?" "My divorce papers." I looked up. "They're ready." "Are you sure?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked toward Daniel's study. I kept waiting for Mark to become the man I married. He never existed. I finally understand that. So, she smiled sadly. I'm done waiting. Several weeks later, the divorce became official. Rachel didn't celebrate. Neither did I. Some endings deserve respect, not applause. One Sunday morning, she joined me at church. It was the first time we had attended together in years. After the service, several friends approached us. No one asked rude questions. Small towns have a way of knowing everything, and wisely saying very little. As we walked toward the parking lot, Rachel asked, "Do people judge me?" "Some probably do." "I deserve that." "Maybe. But people also notice what comes after failure." "What do you mean?" "They're watching what you become next." She thought about that all the way home. Autumn arrived. Leaves covered the yard Daniel had loved. One afternoon, Rachel stood outside raking leaves. I watched quietly through the kitchen window. She looked peaceful. Not happy? Peaceful. There is a difference. Then she walked inside, carrying something. "I found this." It was an old watch, broken, rusty, one of Daniel's practice watches. "I think it stopped years ago." I turned it over in my hands, then smiled. "No. It just needs someone patient enough to repair it." Rachel looked at me. "You sound like Dad." I laughed. "I've been married to him long enough." That night, I made one final trip to the bank. Walter came with me. The safe deposit box opened quietly. Inside rested the real wedding ring, exactly where I had left it. Beside it, Daniel's original letter. Walter asked softly, "What are you thinking?" I picked up the ring. "I'm thinking Daniel knew something I didn't." "What?" He understood that protecting the ring wasn't the hardest part. "What was knowing when it was safe to bring it home?" Walter nodded. "Is it?" I looked at the diamond sparkling under the bank's bright lights. Then I remembered Rachel's question weeks earlier. "Is the real ring safe?" "Not, how much is it worth?" I smiled. "I think we're getting close." But not yet. Some promises take years to keep. Some wounds need time before they can hold something precious again. I slipped the ring back into its box, locked the door, and whispered something only Daniel could hear. "She's finding her way home." Winter arrived quietly. The first snowfall covered the front yard, where Daniel had once taught Rachel to build snowmen. I stood at the kitchen window with a cup of coffee in my hands. For the first time in many months, the house no longer felt haunted. It simply felt lived in again. Rachel had rented a small apartment across town. Not because she wanted distance from me, because she wanted to learn how to stand on her own again. She found a bookkeeping job at a local nonprofit. The salary wasn't impressive. She didn't care. "It's honest work," she told me. After everything we had been through, those two words meant more than any paycheck. Every Sunday, she came to my house for dinner. Not out of obligation, because she wanted to. Sometimes we cooked together. Sometimes we simply talked. Sometimes we sat in silence. The silence no longer frightened either of us. One afternoon, nearly 6 months after Mark's arrest, Walter stopped by with surprising news. "The sentencing is next week." I had almost forgotten. Not because it didn't matter, because my life had slowly begun moving forward again. Rachel arrived that evening. She already knew. I received a call from the prosecutor. She looked nervous. "Are you going?" "I think I should." She looked down. "So should I." The courtroom was much smaller than I expected. No television cameras, no reporters. Just ordinary people whose lives had collided in painful ways. Mark entered, wearing a prison uniform. He looked older, thinner, tired. For the first time. He didn't search the room for exits. He searched it for faces. When his eyes met Rachel's, she didn't look away. She simply remained still. The judge reviewed every charge: burglary, forgery, identity theft, financial fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. The security video, the forged documents, the statements, Rachel's testimony. Mine. Mark eventually stood to speak. "I made terrible decisions." No one interrupted. "I blamed everyone except myself." He looked toward Rachel. "I'm sorry." Rachel listened quietly, then looked at the judge. Not back at Mark. That told me everything. The apology had arrived too late. After sentencing, Detective Laura Mitchell approached us outside the courthouse. "It's over." I nodded. "Legally." She smiled gently. "The rest takes longer." She was right. Healing has no courtroom, no verdict, no closing argument, only ordinary days, one after another. A week later, Rachel invited me to her apartment for dinner. When I arrived, she seemed unusually nervous. "I have something for you." She handed me a small, wrapped package. Inside was a simple wooden picture frame. Not expensive, handmade. She had built it herself during a community woodworking class. Inside the frame, she had placed 3 photographs. The first was our wedding picture. The second showed Daniel teaching little Rachel to repair a clock. The third was recent. Walter had secretly taken it. It showed Rachel and me repainting Daniel's study together. Below the photographs, she had engraved one sentence: "Families are repaired one honest day at a time." I couldn't speak. She smiled nervously. "I hoped you'd like it." I looked at her. "It's beautiful." "It isn't perfect. Neither are we." She laughed softly. "I guess that's true." That evening, she admitted something else. "I've been volunteering." "Where?" "At a financial counseling center." I raised an eyebrow. "They help people avoid scams." "And debt." "I tell them my story." "You do?" She nodded. "I don't hide it anymore." "What do you tell them?" "The truth." "I tell them?" The first lie I believed wasn't about money. It was believing I had to carry someone else's secrets. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Daniel would have been proud. Months passed. Spring returned. Flowers bloomed around the porch. Life continued doing what life always does, moving forward. One Saturday morning, I finally drove back to the bank. Alone. The same safe deposit box waited for me. Inside, the real wedding ring still rested beside Daniel's letter. This time, I didn't hesitate. I slipped the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly, exactly as it had 43 years earlier. I looked at it for a long time. Then I whispered, "Welcome home." When I returned home, Rachel noticed immediately. She froze in the doorway. "You..." I smiled. "Yes." "That's the real one." She didn't move. Instead, she asked the question I had hoped to hear for months. "Are you sure you're ready to wear it again?" "Not..." "Can I see it?" "Not..." "How much is it worth?" "Only..." "Are you ready?" I nodded. "I think so." She smiled through tears. "So do I." That afternoon, we visited Daniel's grave together. The cemetery was peaceful. Birds filled the trees. Rachel placed fresh flowers beside the headstone. Then she knelt quietly. "I'm sorry, Dad. I can't change what I did. But I promise, I'll spend the rest of my life becoming the daughter you believed I could be." The wind moved gently through the grass. I looked down at my wedding ring, the real one, then at Rachel, standing, not hiding, not pretending, simply telling the truth. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope. Not because the past had disappeared, because it hadn't. The broken trust, the stolen ring, the lies, the betrayal. They would always be part of our story, but they would no longer be the ending. As we walked back toward the car, Rachel slipped her hand into mine, just as she had done when she was 5 years old. I squeezed it gently. Neither of us needed to say anything. Some conversations happen without words, and as I looked once more at the ring Daniel had protected for so many years, I finally understood. He hadn't hidden it because he feared thieves. He had hidden it until our family became worthy of carrying its meaning again. And somehow, against every expectation, we finally were. If you've stayed with me this far, then you already know something important. This story was never really about a wedding ring. The ring simply revealed what was already hidden inside the people who touched it. Greed, fear, love, regret, hope. Years have passed since Rachel smiled while slipping that ring off my finger. Sometimes I still remember that moment, not because I enjoy remembering it, because forgetting it would erase everything we learned afterward. People often ask me whether I ever truly forgave my daughter. The answer surprises them. Forgiveness wasn't a single decision. It was thousands of small ones. Every phone call I answered, every Sunday dinner we shared, every difficult conversation we chose not to avoid, every honest apology, every honest action afterward. Trust returned much more slowly, and that's exactly how it should have been. One afternoon, almost 2 years after everything happened, Rachel invited me to lunch. "I have something to show you." She looked happier than I had seen her in a long time. Not excited, peaceful. There is a difference. We met at the small nonprofit where she now worked. The receptionist smiled the moment Rachel walked through the door. Several coworkers greeted her by name. One older woman hugged her. Watching quietly from the corner, I realized something. My daughter had rebuilt a life. Not a perfect life, a truthful one. After lunch, she led me into a small meeting room. On the wall hung dozens of thank you cards from families the nonprofit had helped. Rachel pointed toward one. A handwritten note read, "Thank you for teaching us that asking for help is stronger than hiding." She smiled. "I didn't write that." "I know, but I understand it." Then she looked at me. "I almost forgot that." I reached into my purse. "There is something I want to show you too." I placed a small velvet box on the table. Rachel looked confused. "What is it?" "Open it." She hesitated, then slowly lifted the lid. Inside rested my wedding ring, the real one. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. "I don't—" She couldn't finish. I gently closed the box. "I'm not giving it to you." She nodded. "I know. I wanted you to see it." "Why?" "Because 2 years ago, you would have seen its value." I touched the box. "Today, I wanted to see whether you understood its meaning." Rachel smiled through tears. "I do." What does it mean? She answered without hesitation. It isn't proof that two people never hurt each other. It's proof that they choose each other again. I felt tears gathering in my own eyes. Daniel would have loved that answer. Very carefully. I opened the box again. Then I removed the ring from my finger. Rachel instinctively stepped backward. No. I can't. I'm afraid. Why, what if I don't deserve to touch it? I smiled. That's why you finally can? I placed the ring gently into her open palm. She held it as though it were made of glass. Not because it was expensive, because she understood what it represented. After a long moment, she handed it back. I don't want to keep it. No. She shook her head. It belongs to you. And Dad. I only wanted the chance to hold it honestly once. I slipped it back onto my finger. It feels different now. Rachel nodded. It should. When we left the nonprofit, Walter was waiting outside. He leaned against his truck with that familiar smile. Well, I laughed. You planned this, didn't you? Maybe. Rachel hugged him. Thank you. For what? For never giving up on Mom. Walter smiled. I wasn't worried about your mother. I was worried about you. On the drive home, I thought about Daniel, about the copy he had secretly made, about the hidden box, about the letter he wrote decades before any of this happened. He had understood something I only fully understand now. Objects cannot protect families. Only truth can. The ring survived because Daniel hid it. Our family survived because eventually we stopped hiding from each other. Sometimes people ask whether I regret pretending to sleep in that hospital room, whether I wish I had grabbed Rachel's hand before she removed my ring, whether I wish I had stopped everything before it became so painful. I always answer the same way. No, because if I had awakened in that moment, Rachel would have denied everything. Mark would have hidden the truth. The debts would have continued. The lies would have grown. Sometimes exposing darkness requires letting it reveal itself. It was the hardest choice I have ever made, but it gave my daughter one final opportunity to choose honesty for herself. She almost missed it, but she didn't. If Daniel were standing beside me today, I think he would smile, not because everything turned out perfectly. Nothing ever does. He would smile because the lesson he tried to teach with an ordinary wedding ring finally reached us. Love without honesty becomes weakness. Honesty without love becomes cruelty. A family survives only when both exist together. Before I finish, I want to tell you one last thing. The fake ring still exists. I keep it in the same wooden box where Daniel first placed it. Not because it's valuable. It isn't. Not because it reminds me of betrayal. It doesn't anymore. I keep it because every time I look at it, I remember that appearances can fool anyone. The fake ring looked identical to the real one, just as fear once disguised itself as love, just as manipulation disguised itself as protection, just as silence disguised itself as peace. Now, when I open that box, I see two rings, one real, one fake. And I remember that every day we all make the same choice, to live honestly or to wear a beautiful lie. Thank you for listening to my story. If even one family chooses one difficult conversation instead of one comforting lie, then Daniel's ring accomplished something far more valuable than money ever could. It reminded us that the strongest things we inherit are not diamonds. They are the values we decide to carry forward. And that is the only inheritance worth protecting. If my story touched your heart today, I hope you'll remember this. Money can tempt people. Fear can change people. But honesty is still the only thing that can truly save a family. Don't wait until trust is broken before telling the truth. Don't assume the people who love you most care about money more than they care about you. Sometimes the hardest conversation is also the one that saves everything. And if someone you love has made a terrible mistake, remember this too. Forgiveness doesn't erase consequences, but when it's earned through honesty, responsibility, and change, it can open a door that seemed permanently closed. That was the greatest gift Daniel ever left us. Not a valuable ring, but a reminder that character is worth far more than anything money can buy. Thank you so much for spending this time with me and listening to my story. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you won't miss future stories. Most importantly, I'd love to hear from you. What would you have done if you had been in my place? Would you have confronted your daughter immediately, or waited like I did for the whole truth to come out? Please share your thoughts in the comments. I read as many of them as I can, and your stories often inspire others who may be facing struggles of their own. Until next time, take care of yourself, cherish the people you love, and never underestimate the power of truth.